Good afternoon. Good morning. At least one of the speaker has very early morning. Let me start today's debate. My name is Andris Piebalgs. I am part-time professor at Florence School of Regulation. Today we have very interesting topic, and we name this debate Unlocking Europe's Geothermal Potential. But we also have a subtitle saying what GeoMap Europe changes for policy and markets. Because last year we got a new tool that definitely requires a lot of new introduction. Geothermal energy is increasingly recognized as an important pillar of Europe's clean energy transition, particularly for district heating, industrial heat, and firm renewable power generation. Yet its deployment has long been constrained by fragmented geological data, high upfront exploration risks, and also regulatory complexity. Today we will explore how new continent-wide mapping tools could fundamentally change this equation. But I believe it is important to start our framing debate with a perspective about geothermal energy in the EU policy framework. And it is my pleasure to introduce Marianne Jakob, Policy Officer in the European Commission's Renewables and Energy System Integration Unit. Marianne works specifically on the decarbonization of the heating and cooling sector. Prior to joining the Commission, she served as energy team leader at the permanent representation of Hungary to the EU. During the Hungarian presidency, she chaired the Council Working Group on Energy and led the Council conclusions on geothermal energy. Marianna, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the nice introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you also for the invitation for this very timely debate. As you all know, and it was also mentioned, in the European Union, we are entering into a crucial phase in the transformation of the energy system, and we have overarching goals, so like climate neutrality, reducing dependence on imported fossil fuels, competitiveness, and at the same time keeping the prices affordable for consumers. And for all of these objectives, the answer is usually increasing renewable energy, mobilizing all renewable energy sources, where geothermal can really play a key role. So it is still an untapped renewable energy source, though we know that it has multiple benefits. For example, it can provide heat, as you also mentioned, for buildings, industry, and district heating companies at a predictable price, irrelevant of global price fluctuations. It is also locally available and independent of weather condition, but it can also provide baseload electricity 24/7, which is really a unique characteristics with regards to other renewables. And with that, it can also provide stability for the energy system, and it can really contribute to system integration. It also has a role in storage to balance the demand and supply in a seasonal level. That is also very necessary for the energy system. And we can also mention its specialty when extracting geothermal energy. You can also extract lithium, so it can also increase the EU's strategic independence on raw materials. So geothermal energy now will really play a key role also in the electrification agenda with the system integration point of view, reducing the pressure on electricity grids. And it will also play a role in the decarbonization of the air heating and cooling strategy, which are the initiatives that we are now working on at the Commission. So when we talk about the incoming initiatives, these three always will go together. That is at least the plan. So I listed here the huge potential and the benefits of geothermal energy. Still, actually, it is underutilized in the EU. We have only approximately 44 gigawatt installed capacity. I have the 24 numbers, which comprises only 1 gigawatt of electricity. While at the same time, we have studies, including from Aalborg University or from the International Energy Agency, pointing to a really huge potential that it could supply around 30-40% of Europe district heating needs. And really, there is a huge potential for electricity with now new next generation technologies. But still, despite its potential, geothermal faces structural and regulatory and financial barriers. Also, because it is a special energy source, it involves high upfront costs for exploration and drilling, which can deter private investment. And there is what this seminar is about, the issue of the accessibility of subsurface data. It is still fragmented and incomplete in several member states and in several regions. And then, as in the case of many renewable technologies, regulatory and permitting procedures are still very long. And I have to say that in case of geothermal, it is even more complex than in case of other renewables, because several authorities, mining, water management, and so on, they are all involved. We know that there is a potential, and there is already a comprehensive regulatory framework in place in the EU that could drive the transition and the increase of renewable sources, which are also relevant for geothermal energy. So first of all, there is already the Renewable Energy Directive with explicit heating and cooling targets, with provisions on accelerated permitting, with a framework for energy communities that also goes for heat energy communities. It's not very often used. There is already the Electricity Market Design Directive, where member states should promote the use of contracts for difference, also for geothermal energy. Geothermal is explicitly mentioned. There is the Energy Efficiency Directive, which aims to modernize district heating systems and also sets requirements for integrated heating and cooling planning for municipalities, where the local nature of geothermal is also very important and should be planned at this first level. There is the Net Zero Industry Act, which lists geothermal on energy as a net zero technology, where the aim is to scale up manufacturing and to strengthen the European supply chain. And there is the Clean Industrial Deal that aims to increase the investment in clean technologies. So all of this will also strengthen the case for geothermal energy development across Europe, we hope. But we know it might not be enough, so we are planning already the next steps. And we are working on a heating and cooling strategy that will be adopted hopefully later this year. And it will facilitate this already existing framework that I just mentioned. So it will not propose new legislation, but it will really aim to facilitate the implementation of what we already have. Like it will aim to help municipalities with local planning, to improve the decarbonization of district heating and cooling, to facilitate the deployment of clean heating technologies like heat pumps, which are also relevant for geothermal, and to improve the market conditions. And the heating and cooling strategy will be accompanied by a geothermal action plan, and that will address the challenges which are more inherent to geothermal energy itself. So it will be complementary to the strategy, and it will outline the key challenges, the best practices, and possible actions to promote geothermal energy. And first of all, we know that geological risk is one of the most defining challenges of geothermal, especially deep geothermal development. The feasibility of the geothermal system depends heavily on the subsurface conditions, on the temperature, on the pressure. So we see that when there is no access or there is not enough subsurface data available, or if it's difficult to obtain for project promoters, it is clearly a big barrier for geothermal projects. So the geothermal action plan will aim to point out this and try to improve the accessibility and the accurateness of geological data, which will also decrease the upfront costs and upfront drilling and exploration risks of the project. We will also try to recommend the digitalization of the mapping, data mapping. So in this respect, the inner space project will be really useful also to point out and increase the awareness and the knowledge for decision makers and investors, what is there under beneath our feet and what is possible. We are also in contact with the European Geological Survey organizations to improve the collaboration with the national geological surveys. So we know that even on member states level and European level, it is very important to provide an up-to-date and aggregated data on geothermal. And in the geothermal action plan, as I mentioned, we will also look into the challenges of permitting, where we are not proposing new things, but just pointing out that there is already the renewable framework, and member states should also use the Renewable Energy Directive and shorten deadlines for geothermal, because usually when it's about the renewable directive in the implementation, member states tend to forget about geothermal. So the shortened deadlines also apply for geothermal energy. There should be designated acceleration areas for renewable energy and simplified permitting for shallow geothermal heat pumps and contact points. They all could facilitate the geothermal project. And thirdly, in the action plan, we are also looking into how to utilize the already existing infrastructure, the know-how, the workforce, and also the data, what is already there in the fossil industry, which is extremely relevant for regions in just transition. So to use the know-how and also to provide new opportunities in clean technologies for these whole regions in transition. And we also know that the cooperation with industry would be very important to bring together different actors, policymakers, regulators, industry, and geological surveys. So we are also looking into a platform to exchange best practices and experiences. this is more or less what we are working on right now. Everything is still in the making, so I'm very much looking forward to your input to our work. I'm sure it will be very useful also from the Inner Space project to have really a good overview and a visual tool that shows the potential for investors, but also from Anna Maria to have the bottom up and really accurate data from member states. And then on EU level, I'm sure it is really always the first step to go ahead with geothermal projects. Thank you very much.
Marianne, it was really very impressive presentation, and we'll wish all the success to you. But as you left me a couple of minutes, I have a rather, yeah, it's not political so a question, but it's really perception question. When I read national energy and climate plans, I was disappointed about low, low ambition on geothermal. Now in Germany there is debate on heating law, and they moved, interestingly enough, in green gas, like also for heating, cooling gas. So, and for me, again, and Germany is very positive about geothermal, not a question about it. What are the biggest barrier in member states thinking about geothermal? They don't see the potential, or they see that it is some risks? Because for me, it's very difficult to understand where is this blockage, because why it's not been more ambitious, in your opinion? Because you work in council, so it's not that to criticize, but really to anticipate more. Do we need more advocacy, more data, more presentations, or how we could change this perception issue?
I think that when the national plans of the member states were set up, it was all before this whole geothermal debate came up in the council, in the parliament, and now it reached really the highest level also at the commission. Because if you looked at speeches of the commissioner or even the commission in general, geothermal was not really mentioned anywhere. So I'm just hoping that in the next updates of the national plans, geothermal can be much more relevant, and it will be really considered. We are working on that, and I know that member states are also trying, not only in Western Europe but also in Eastern Europe. I was also part of the Modernization Fund committee before, where from Bulgaria, Romania, the ministry representatives came to us. I mean, the Hungarian ministry, and to Hungarian experts, asking us how do we do it? Do we have good examples? So I know that it is already in the political thinking, but they just need some guidance, some cooperation. That's what I also mentioned, that a platform to exchange best practices, where it works, where it not, and what can be done, how to decrease the costs that could be useful. That I think that always comes when you talk to government, then the Ministry of Finance always come, how much money you need it. So every tool we can decrease the cost, where we can give support that can facilitate then also the decision makers on policy level.
Thank you, Mariana. Let's hope that you are fully right. So, and our next presentation definitely could help this. So our next speaker is Drew Nelson, Vice President for Programs, Policy and Strategy at Project Inner Space. Drew has extensive experience in international climate policy, including roles at the US Department of State, the Environmental Defense Fund, and major philanthropic climate initiatives. At Project Inner Space, he leads efforts to remove barriers to global geothermal development. Today, he will introduce GeoMap Europe, a platform integrating millions of subsurface data points into what is described as the most comprehensive, freely accessible geothermal visualization tool globally. Drew, please take us through the platform.
Thank you, Andres. And as I share my screen, I just want to acknowledge that Andres and I know each other through a dear mutual friend of ours who sadly is no longer with us. But it's wonderful that his legacy can continue in wonderful and interesting conversations like this. As Andres mentioned, my name is Drew Nelson. I'm with Project Interspace, which is a global nonprofit focused on catalyzing geothermal energy globally. And one of the ways that we do that is to try to get better data to overcome some of the great barriers that Mariana was just describing a couple minutes ago. And we have a tool called GeoMap, which if you go to geomap.projectinterspace.org, it'll take you to the screen. You have to log in with an email. And then once you agree to the terms of reference, you see a map. And there's hundreds and hundreds of data layers. And this tool was built with scientists, a team of 100 scientists or so from various institutions, including many in Europe, that is pulling together all sorts of different information type. And so I'm not a geologist, but you can kind of click on here and you can see, where are the plate boundaries and where are the active faults. And you can see, where is the fault block stress and what is the crustal stress field orientation and regime. All of these various data sources come from a team of scientists and then get fed into GeoMap and the model that sits underneath it. There's also really important pieces in terms of how thick is the sediment, how thick is the lithosphere, and all of that feeds into what we have here in GeoMap, where you can kind of see all sorts of really interesting conclusions. And I think it's also worth noting that in terms of what Mariana was saying, we also have a layer that doesn't have much, it seems, in Europe, but you can see in different places the concentration of lithium in produced water from oil and gas wells. So to the critical minerals point that Mariana was making, GeoMap can be an interesting data point for that as well. Um, and it also has all the various active geothermal sites and a bunch of other information. If I could just, answer the question from Andres a couple of minutes ago that Mariana answered as well, why is geothermal not so firmly on the radar in Europe? I agree with what Mariana said. If you're not in Iceland, if you're not in Turkey or Italy, um, in all likelihood, geothermal isn't on your radar as a policymaker. But because of all the advances that we've seen over the last couple of years, it can be a really important tool, not just for power generation, but for residential and commercial heating and cooling, as well as industrial decarbonization. Both of those also have really important benefits onto the grid, particularly as we move towards an era of electrification. If a lot of that is already being powered by gas, new electrification would be needed, new energy sources. But if some of that could be offset by geothermal, there's a very huge value to the grid. And I think that's why geothermal is also having a bit of a resurgence right now, because it can bring such value to the grid. So, with that said, we have data not just for Europe, but for South America, Middle East, Oceania, North America. So this is a global tool. But today I'm just going to do a little bit of a deep dive on Europe. And again, the reason why this tool exists is because anybody can go out into a field and say, oh, hey, it's pretty sunny. Let's put some solar panels. Or, hey, that's a nice breeze. Maybe we should put some wind turbines here. But nobody has a pair of X-ray goggles that they can put on and go, okay, I need to drill down to 3,000 meters to get to 100 degrees centigrade. And so GeoMap exists to try to be that tool so that policymakers, project developers can understand where geothermal projects may or may not make sense. And I think it's also important to note here that we don't just use subsurface data. There's a lot of information in GeoMap in terms of, where are the power plants? What sort of power plants are they? Where are the boreholes? So when you drill a well, no matter what sort of well it is, that well usually comes with a temperature data set. And so you can see what some of those temperatures are, and that all feeds into the model. You can see where the power lines are. And this is a large data set, so it takes a while to load. But if you're looking to understand where you could put a project, knowing where the transmission lines is a very helpful data point. Um, and you can also see, where is it steep or not steep? Because it's not particularly easy to put a geothermal project on the side of a mountain, although it's been done. Project developers can take all of this information and then zero in on the places that they think make the most sense. Um, so for Europe, we've got a lot of really interesting data sets, all of which are publicly available. And for any of these data sets, you can click on the I button and it tells you what the data set is and where you can access it. So you can see, where is the modeled heat demand distribution. And you can see what is the heat density. The higher the heat density, the more it might make sense to do a district heating project, for example. Similarly, you can see what the cooling density is. Just as there's district heating projects, there are also district cooling projects that could be implemented. And in a warming world, particularly in Southern Europe, district cooling might be a very interesting policy tool to explore. We also have within Europe uh, the kind of looking at where there are various district heatings systems already, and where are the cities that are currently utilizing geothermal heating in Europe. So you can see there's already a fair amount of geothermal district heating in Europe, but the potential is actually much more. And then we also have what is one of my favorite layers within this tool. These are all the various industrial sites. So you can see the type of industrial facilities and by the sector, and you can see what their greenhouse gas emissions are. So what we have done, and what I'll show you here in just a second, is mapping those industrial facilities with where geothermal potential exists. What we haven't done is to say, okay, well, you should therefore prioritize the sites with the bigger greenhouse gas emissions. But this is where it can be a very useful and interesting tool for policymakers. So all that said, what does it look like for Europe? So this is the industrial layer, and you can see all the various industrial facilities. And I'll zoom in here on, um, looks like this area around Frankfurt is of interest. And so you can see, you can click on the facility and it'll tell you that this is an iron and steel mill and it's got a lot of geothermal potential. Unfortunately, with today's geothermal technologies, geothermal is probably not going to be a solution for an iron and steel mill because the temperature demand is much higher. But there still could be some processes there that could benefit from geothermal. But for chemical manufacturing, like at this facility, or for grain and oil seed milling, a lot of food processing can do a lot of really interesting things with geothermal and save a lot of resources. The issue, though, sometimes is that it's not cost effective for one facility to drill a geothermal well for itself. And so that's why we developed this industrial clustering tool where you can see the heat demand by temperature. Unlike when the previous layer where the redder the better in terms of the geothermal potential, in this layer, the redder the better in terms of the heat demand that a facility needs. But we're working and should have relatively soon another version of this, which looks at the companies in a general area and the geothermal potential and the greenhouse gas emissions to turn these clusters into where are the clusters that would most make sense to do a shared geothermal project that could help decarbonize their emissions. Um, and then we also have the coal facilities across Europe where there might be potential for geothermal to be used in those coal facilities, taking advantage of existing transmission lines and infrastructure to bring firm power to the grid. So, there's not a ton of coal retrofit potential, but there is some really interesting opportunities here in Eastern Europe. The last thing that I'll show you is it's back up here in our global layer. But what we have done is we have looked at all of the potential for geothermal subsurface, looking at the aquifers at a 40-degree cutoff as well as a 60-degree cutoff. And then we have mapped that in terms of the cities that could most directly benefit from geothermal heating and cooling at 40 degrees and 60 degrees. And again, in the I button here, you can see how we've come up with what we've come up with. But the larger the dot here, the larger the population area. And you can also scroll. So let's just look at the cities in Europe that are most favorable for geothermal district heating at a 40-degree C cutoff. And some really interesting things pop up. Major cities, Paris, Berlin, Milan, Vienna, and not to mention a bunch of Amsterdam, not to mention a bunch of other smaller cities that are still quite large, have huge potential for geothermal district heating. Just like with the industrial clusters that we're working on improving, we're also trying to come up with a ranking of these cities based on, if there's a district heating system in a town that is powered by coal, maybe that would be a very easy thing to retrofit and have a huge emission savings. So we're the next iteration of this is to make it easier for policymakers and project developers to not only see where is the heat resource, which communities have the best potential, but also where would that potential have the biggest impact from a climate perspective. And then the last thing I'll say is that geothermal isn't just an environmental solution, particularly when you're talking about geothermal heating and for industrial decarbonization. Geothermal can be a way to help Europe be far more energy secure and less reliant on gas imports from other places, rather than having to bring gas in from Russia or other places. There is the ability to tap into Europe's own energy resource and have a huge impact there on price volatility as well as energy security. So there's a lot to play around in here. There's a ton of information, but please, I encourage you all to go to geomap.projectinterspace.org, log in and play around and see just how useful this tool can be. Thank you.
Thank you, Drew. There was a question from Ekaterina, and Sanjeev already answered partially, but so is GeoMap accessible to everybody with no limitations?
Yes, anybody can go to that website and see all the stuff that I have just showed you. Some of the raw data underneath it is not yet available. We're in the process of trying to make all that publicly available over the coming months and beyond. But yes, everything that you just saw is freely accessible. You don't have to pay anything. All you have to do is put in your email and you have access to seeing that information. And hopefully, again, the goal here is to create more geothermal projects and having the data, the hurdles on data to be less big. That's what GeoMap exists to do. And so that's why it's freely accessible, so people can access it and use it to get more projects in the ground.
Yeah, I saw that Sanjeev raised his hand. Sanjeev, please.
Just two quick things. Firstly, always a pleasure to see you, Drew, walk us through the GeoMap project. I've put the link to the website in the chat. So for everybody who's kind of listening, please click on that link. And Drew, if you could just clarify, it's both degrees. The temperature is both in Fahrenheit and Celsius. Yes.
It depends on the temperature set, but this particular one was Celsius.
Superb. Thank you.
And actually, seeing Sanjeev reminds me that I failed to mention one of the key things about GeoMap. Is both Sanjeev and I were part of a meeting that the International Energy Agency pulled together almost 2 years ago now, in advance of their Future of Geothermal report that came out in late 2024. And that is a huge and fantastic report. For those that haven't seen it, it's worth checking out. Either Sanjeev or I can put it into the chat here in a second. But IA did a lot of work to understand where is the geothermal potential globally. What does that look like, not just for power, but also for industrial processes? And the data underneath that report in terms of where is the geothermal potential, what is the geothermal potential, is pulled from GeoMap. And we worked closely with the IEA staff to give them that subsurface information that they were then able to use to say things like there's enough geothermal potential based on their analysis to power the world 140 times over. And that there's more geothermal potential than any other renewable resource except for solar. So, a really great resource from the IEA that pulls from the GeoMap data. And again, exactly why we have this tool, so that policymakers and decision makers can access it and make better policy because of it.
Thank you, Drew. So we move to the panel, but you will be welcome very much to come in also during the panel discussion. Before starting the panel, I would like to start with a short framing intervention, because there are different platforms. And I would like to invite Anna Maria Nadar, chair of the European Union Geoenergy Expert Group, to introduce the Pan-European Geothermal Atlas developed under the Geological Service for Europe initiative. This initiative represents a complementary mapping approach built on collaboration among national geological surveys across Europe. So, Anna Maria, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Andres, for the introduction. And I prepared a very short presentation. And I would like to ask Roberta if you can put it in the full screen mode, then I can start with. Yes, and perfect. Thank you very much. So thank you very much again for the nice introduction and for the opportunity to briefly present here another online platform which has slightly different focus and concepts behind, but the aim is the same: to show and highlight the geothermal potential in Europe. So the next slide, please. So this atlas, which I will show you, is basically a product of an ongoing Horizon Europe funded project called the Geological Service for Europe. And this project is run or led by Eurogeo Surveys, which is the umbrella organization of 37 national geological surveys in Europe. And the important thing is that all these national geological surveys in each country are by the law mandated to collect, store, and manage national subsurface data. So it means we really have a huge data input to all our work. And the overall goal of this project is to provide a pan-European geological data and information service for the sustainable and safe use of our resources, so not only geothermal, but raw materials, groundwaters, and to make it publicly available through a portal which we call European Geological Data Infrastructure. And within this portal, I will focus on the atlas of deep geothermal, which I will quickly show you in the next slide. So the next slide, please. So the whole concept of this pan-European atlas was that we first gathered a lot of information from historic projects. You know that there were several different pan-European geothermal atlases, the early ones coming from the Commission and then from other projects. And to complement this with huge national databases which are coming from the National Geological Surveys, then update and expand and generate new layers, and based on this compile this new pan-European geothermal atlas. The next slide, please. So from the geological perspective, we basically followed this play-based exploration pyramid concept and the geothermal play concept, which was developed by Inga Möck and her colleagues. And we also followed this gradual transition that first we are looking at high coverage with low level of knowledge, and as we go higher and higher on this pyramid, we have a more and more detailed knowledge, but of course with a lower coverage. So with the level 1, the basic information, we collected a lot of data from different boreholes, wells, thermal springs. Then at level 1, we mapped the favorable areas for geothermal potential based on this play concept, which I will show you. These levels are already ready, so I will show you at the next slides. And then on level 2 and 3, we will map and outline the most prosperous areas. So we will go on a reservoir scale within these big geothermal plays. So the next slide, please. So the platform, which is similarly to the InnerSpace platform or the GeoMap platform, is a publicly available platform for everybody, freely accessible. This is the HDI platform, which you can reach at this europegeology.eu site. And here, if you go to the map viewer, you will see again very similar structure with the different layers on the left side, from where you can pick the relevant information. So first, I would like to show you the boreholes and wells. So the next slide, if you click on that. Here we collected data from more than 55,000 geothermal boreholes and wells from Europe. And on the left side, if you go to the menu, you can actually you can filter from these huge data sets according to the depth of the well, the bottom hole temperature, the drill year, the country. So you can make search by yourself. And if you go to the next slide, and if you pick up any well or any borehole, or you can even search for a certain area for different boreholes, you get the actual data themselves. So this is very important that on this portal you get the data, not only the visualization where you have the boreholes. And this is in a kind of table where you can get all the detailed information. So for each of these 55,000 borehole, the depths, the temperature, the lithology, the water chemistry, everything. And what is even important, that for each object, you get the link to the original database, because the original data are coming from the National Geological Survey, so you can even go back to the source of the data. The next slide, please. This is the same we collected for thermal springs. So there are about 2,400 thermal springs we get the data. And again, here you can filter similarly according to temperature, the flow rate, the hydrogeochemical character of the thermal spring, or by country. And if you go to the next slide, the structure is the same. So you can pick up any spring or any cluster of springs, and if you click on that, then in a table you get the individual data, so the coordinates, the name, temperature, and so on for each object, each spring. So this is really a very, very rich source of the actual data themselves. The next one, please. So that's what level 2. That was level 0, so the basic data. And at level 1, we made this very large scale, so the largest scale mapping for favorable areas based on this geothermal play concept, which means that we make the categories according to this, to the heat transfer mechanism, and according to the tectonostratigraphic setting of the geological parts. And as you see, we were able to map different geothermal play types. And what is very important, if you see at the map, that these large areas, these plays, are absolutely uniform, so irrespective of state borders. So there are many plays which are cut by different country borders. And if you go to the next slide, and for each play, there is a downloadable fact sheet in PDF format, which you can also download from this site. And there is a detailed description of that geothermal play, so the geology, the utilization, the geothermal properties, the most important literatures. So this is where we are at the moment, and in this year, hopefully in the early summer, we will publish on this HDI website the level 2 information, when among these geothermal plays, we will go for a higher resolution, so we will show the individual reservoirs with a similar information. Next one. And so why all this is important for Europe? Of course, Mariana was mentioning all this historical process from the Parliament resolution, Council conclusions, that the Commission is working hard on the geothermal action plan. And as she also highlighted, the data availability will be a crucial part of this action plan. And that's why we are really fast working on the further development of this European geological data infrastructure platform, what I was showing, where we really aim that this should be a central access point to geological data and information related to geothermal, which will help the decision makers to formulate the supportive policies. For example, the identification of these renewable go-to areas, to underpin risk mitigation schemes, to help project developers. So we really hope that this is already there, but it will be more detailed and more rich to help Europe to unlock its huge geothermal potential. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Anna Maria. I would like now to introduce two other members of the panel. First, Professor Dr. David Bruun. David Bruun is affiliated with Delft University of Technology in the Netherlands and Fraunhofer IEG in Cottbus, Germany, where he serves as head of global georesources. His work focuses on geothermal development, subsurface heat storage, CO2 and hydrogen storage, and cross-border energy system integration. He also chairs the joint program Geothermal at the European Energy Research Alliance. Sanjeev Kumar is Policy Director at the European Geothermal Energy Council, representing more than 200 members across 30 countries. European Geothermal Energy Council works to improve investment conditions, shape EU policy, and accelerate geothermal deployment across Europe. Sanjeev has a long experience also with EU decision-making bodies, in particular European Parliament. He has worked in NGO area and has broad knowledge and broad experience in the area of dealing with climate change issues. If I may to make a question to both of you, because the question of data. Now we have GeoMap Europe, we have Pan-European Geothermal Atlas, but when Drew made the presentation, he made one very cautious sentence, basically said, well, hurdles on that data less prominent or something similar to that. So we have a data, is it enough now to say that we have enough data really to seriously scale up geothermal energy? So who would still like to start? David?
Okay, I can do that. Thank you. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. comment on this whole development and on especially for your question, Andres. To be quite blunt, okay, as a scientist, we never have enough data, okay? So this is an insatiable thing, you know, that whenever you have more data, you need even more because then new questions arise. So that's something that is inherent to scientific development and curiosity. But to be quite frank, even though I'm really, really pleased with these developments, both with the GeoMap, but also with the GSEU developments, you know, to have these platforms where we can make available data visible and usable. I think what is lacking is a lot of existing data that we don't have access to, and we know that they exist, especially from the hydrocarbon industry. And that has to do with the way it's regulated. You know, they don't have to share data, or sometimes they do share data, but they are not accessible, or something like this. And I think there's a huge database that is not yet available. But, you know, as soon as we want to get into the development phase, you know, we need to know the local situation. And in some cases, we do know it. And then therefore development start. And this is in places where you actually have a lot of legacy data from the hydrocarbon industry that is accessible. And one example is here in the Netherlands, where this has been regulated. You know, these data are available, you know, beautiful online platform, etc. But this is an exception. There are many other places. The other country where I work and where I actually live is in Germany. This is much more, let's say, heterogeneous. There are some places where you get good data access also to non-geothermal data, but in most places you don't. And very often the data are not even digitalized. They're old data. So you are welcome to go and look at them in some archive in a paper format, but this is not something you can use for the development of your geothermal project. So at the end of the day, it's very useful to say, yes, we have this play-based approach, we have this geothermal atlas and all these things, and up to date, great tools to start and look, you know, if you from a bird's eye view to say, hey, let me go, I want to invest a couple of billion euros, where can I do this, you know? But if you actually want to go into the project scale and say, okay, where exactly can I drill and develop something sizable and economically beneficial for myself, then you need more detail, and there's a lot of information is still not accessible, even though it exists. And I think this is where we need more effort also from the European side, but also at the national levels, to have harmonized regulations that even data that are not accessible yet are made accessible. And as I said, in the Netherlands, we have these rules. We've had them for more than 20 years. It works really well. And it has triggered a lot of development in the Netherlands, a country that you don't associate with abundant geothermal resources, right? But it's used here, and I'm very proud because we started geothermal operations here on the TU Delft campus yesterday. And it's something that is an infrastructure that is a research infrastructure as well as a commercial infrastructure. So something that is very dear to us, that we can actually have access to all the data. We generate a lot of new data also from the science side, something that is very rare, but it's a fantastic situation to be in. But we need a lot more of this kind of thing in Europe. But I think we are at the beginning of a good development. Thank you.
If I could just
Thank you, David.
jump
Yeah.
in.
Sanjeev, you are very much welcome. I saw that Drew raised his hand, but I will give us the chance to Drew respond after you would have make your input in this from industry point of view or from your personal experience point of view, how you would evaluate this data issue.
Yeah, so just to build on the really rich content that's just come through, let me make two observations. The first one is that in the past, it's been difficult for regulators, certainly at European level, to focus on geothermal because they weren't really sure of the potential. I think what Drew and Anna Maria have clearly demonstrated in the few minutes they spoke, there's pretty good understanding of what that potential could be. So there's nothing really holding back the political actions on geothermal. I think this is the thing that we've learned today. Let me make two observations. And this is kind of building on what David said. We have, there are models and there are data, but when you're actually investing in a project, the real acid test is when you drill a hole in the ground. And that's where the horrible beast of risk comes up, because you may have a map that says X marks the spot, but you have to go down to a certain depth. You have to find out what the temperature is going to look like, what the flow rate, if there's a hydrothermal resource, is going to look like. Also, if you're looking at much more shallow projects, geothermal heat pumps, for example, you need to know where the drinking water tables are to avoid any kind of contamination with drinking water. Unlikely to happen, but it's important to kind of remove those perceptions. So this is where the issue that we haven't talked about, which is how do we get more new data into these data sets, becomes really quite important. And for this, we kind of need to start looking at policy solutions. So as an industry, we're looking at ways in which we can help support geological surveys and the experts who are able to do drilling, 3D seismic mapping, for example, but a variety of other technologies out there to actually go out and find the blank spots that we have on those maps, so that we can start to, you know, genuinely invest in those regions and deliver the energy services that consumers want. Now, there's an interesting example of this in Croatia, which I think I want to bring and put on the table. There's a hydrocarbon agency, which is responsible for oil, gas, and geothermal, has invested using European funding to do new drilling in order to provide new data for project developers. And I think this is the kind of approach that we need to do. This is not, whilst it's presented by the scientific community here, this is essential data for our energy security, our independence, and it's an investment in Europe. So it's important for us to get this data, because on the back of this, you allow industrial players to come in and spend multiple millions of euros developing geothermal systems that help solve all of the kind of crises that we face, whether it's geopolitics, but also, quite frankly, the cost of living as well. So investing in Europe and investing in data is the most important thing we can do. And what we need to do is just to find financial incentives, where it's a repayable grants to allow the research agencies to go out and get the you know, much more granular data at different depths so that we can develop projects. I'll hand over to Drew.
Thank you, Sanjay. Drew, you wanted to intervene, I think, when the restriction of data was mentioned by David. Please.
Yeah, and I think we're all generally on the same page here that more data is always a good thing, right? And there's no question in my mind that in Anna Maria's excellent tool in GeoMap, if there was more data in there, those tools would be even more powerful. Yet, I think it's important to note here that, you know, GeoMap, at least, I can't speak for Anna Maria's tool, isn't designed for a project developer to say, I'm going to drill in this exact spot, and I know the exact subsurface characterization of this exact spot. GeoMap is a tool to say, whether it's a project developer or a policymaker, to say, oh wow, I actually have some geothermal potential here that I didn't know about previously. I should do a test well and understand what the properties are, and move things forward. And so if you're using GeoMap as a prospecting tool, you're using it correctly. If you're using GeoMap as a tool to decide on where exactly you're going to put a project, you maybe aren't using it the way that we had intended to use it for. That said, but the whole issue here is, yes, more data is needed, but we have enough as a community to know where to start generally putting in projects, where to start doing those test wells, where to start developing projects, where you could do data center projects, where you could do power projects, where you could do district heating. That's well known. And now you need to get to the point of project finance and the hurdle that geothermal has, which is the large capex for doing those test wells. And a lot of times finance doesn't want to pay for them because of the potential risk. As you get more of those projects, as you start to make that cookie cutter, you bring down those costs, you reduce that risk, and then we're really off to the races. And that's what I think all collectively we're trying to do. And just the last point I'd make, to just dig deeper on what David was saying, in an unnamed country, we approached their oil ministry to say, hey, we'd like to take some of your data that's publicly available and put it onto GeoMap. And they said, great, are you using it for oil and gas exploration? And we said, well, no, it's for geothermal, but they're kind of related. And they said, sorry, you can only use our data for unless you're using it for oil and gas. So there's all sorts of little restrictions like that that could be overcome and could make the pool of data that we have even better.
Thank you. Yeah, I see Anna Maria has raised her hand. Anna Maria, please come in.
Yes, thank you. Just very quickly. So Drew was absolutely speaking of my heart, and also on behalf of the GSU Atlas, that these portals never ever aimed, and I think it would be totally unrealistic to expect that they would replace such data density, which would be okay for a concrete drilling or project development. So these portals are really to raise the attention on the areas, favorable areas, potentials, and so on and so on. But to move a little bit forward, I think what would be important for the future, and the GeoMap already made a lot of progress in that direction. Probably Drew did not have time to show that, but I was really enjoying that, looking purely at the geology, so what kind of formations, temperatures, whatever is great for geologists, but for investors and for policymakers, I think it's very, very important to translate these information, what we call these techno-social or socio-economic parameters or indicators, whatever, that from this geological information, we make layers which give information on the capex, opex, levelized cost of electricity, and so on and so on. And I think GeoMap already has this tool and these layers. I'm sure Drew can tell more about this. But our aim in the GeoAtlas is also to give this more, let's say, information which is probably more easy to understand and digest for a project developer. And I think that's an important future progress.
If I could just intervene real quick, and thank you, Anna Maria, for saying that. I didn't have time, but I'm going to just share my screen again real quick and just show you what that looks like. And but so this is a map of Europe based on the heat potential at 5 kilometers. You can click on any spot and say, okay, well, I want to compare this spot with that spot with that spot. And it'll tell you in real time which of these places has the higher potential. You can then click on this button right here, which this is our test tool, our techno-economic sensitivity tool. And hopefully that has taken, you can see a different screen now. And so you can now, on this techno-economic sensitivity tool, it comes preloaded with a number of default assumptions, but you can say what you want, power or heat or cooling, and then you can change what you think the temperature gradient is. You can change what you think the multiplier cost should be. And as you do that, all of these outputs will change. And so you can, as a project financer or as a project developer, you can go in here, and if you have already information about the site, you can plug that in and you can have a real sense of what the project economics are, which we think is a huge step forward in getting projects financed and out the door in a way that doesn't exist previously. So thank you, Anna Maria, for raising that. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Sanjeev, I see you're waiting.
Yeah, I find this this is a great conversation to have. But I want to go back to the first point that you raised, Andres, because I think in many ways that's the crux of this. We've heard that we know roughly where to look. We've just heard from Drew that you can start to look at what the business case and the business model would look like. But the fundamental question for geothermal is less the data. It's much more the actual demand creation. And I think this is a difference, and this is the drawback that geothermal faces, that, you know, our colleagues in who work on wind, on solar, on hydrogen, on you know, sustainable synthetic aviation fuels, is that they have a European-wide target. And that European-wide target drives, in many instances, that industry. That's why there's so much attention focused from a financial perspective, from a regional perspective. That's why there's so much kind of institutional support to drive those investments forward. We miss that in geothermal, and the one thing that we desperately want to have from the upcoming geothermal action plan is some idea of what that target's going to look like, because what that target conversation means ultimately is how big is the market for me as an investor? If I'm a serious company that wants to make, not just a one project, but a portfolio of 100 projects over a decade, how much support am I going to get? It also then allows governments to start saying, well, okay, this is not just important for my country. This is important for the rest of Europe and our collective, energy system, that single energy market that we've been talking about for the last X couple of decades. So this is the most important feature. I just want to point one thing. We're talking about a European roadmap. Some countries have developed their own national roadmaps and strategies. France, Hungary, Croatia, Germany, Poland. All of these are kind of looking at their national issues, but in the national silo. There are a lot of things that can be Europeanized, where if we work together, we can actually create that bigger market for geothermal and open up the investment case. Because whilst it's all good showing all these projects and potentials on a data set somewhere, what we really measure our lives on is the number of investments in the ground, the number of systems that are up and running. And that's really the key thing that we need to get from the political signals that Mariana and her colleagues in the Commission are working on. I'll hand back to you.
Thank you, Sanjeev. David, and I know that you would like to intervene on this part, but if I may ask you also to at the end, whatever you intend to say on this data debate, I ask you to say what would be success case for Europe to get on geothermal, theoretical, but when we would say, well, we use the potential, how it should be designed, what parameters, what key performance indicators, how to look for success in the area. So as much as you can, and please, all others you are very much welcome in it, because if you build strategy or action plan, you need always to think what I would like to get to. Realistic, but ambitious. And then you build the path. So David, the floor is yours.
Okay, I'll try and get to this, but it's not easy, right? Okay, I would like to start with getting back to the data thing very briefly, and then I'll come to your question, Andres. I would like to comment on what Drew and Anna Maria said, because I think you're a bit modest when you say, that the tool cannot do certain things. I think you're too modest, because it really depends on the data density. And you have areas where we have high data density, and pretty sure that is where geothermal is already happening. Like, for example, in Tuscany, or in the area of Bavaria, south of Munich, or, in the Paris basin around Paris. There are areas where there is a lot of geothermal development. And of course, in Iceland, let's just forget about Iceland for the time being, because that just works really well there and is not transferable to most places in Europe. But, there are places where we have high data density, even from geothermal projects. So including temperature data, including reservoir property data, etc., where I'm pretty sure with all the data in your databases, you can get to a relatively detailed picture, even at the local scale. So yeah, so if you say it's not good for that, I think it is in some places, right? And we need to get to this level in more places. That's all I'm trying to say, by accessing all the data that are available, but cannot be used for the time being. So not available mean for all the data that exists, I should say, not always available, unfortunately, or accessible. Now, to come to your question, what can we do at the European scale? I mean, one thing is, let me speak with the viewpoint of the researcher. Okay, that's my privilege. I'm here as a scientist. Okay, I think one of the key things we need to realize is that we say, okay, this is an ambition we have as a continent or as a European Union to develop this, and most countries agree. Most member states agree that we want to do this. Then we also need, to make sure in the action plan that we provide the tools for the development. And one of the tools is, of course, to have a more, let's say, harmonized regulatory framework. In many countries, it doesn't exist. Sometimes there are contradicting laws in the, let's say, in one part of the, subsurface regulations to others. For example, when you want to drill and there's a mining law, it may be in complete contradiction to the water protection law, to environmental laws, for example, right? There are certain things you have to do, but those things you are not allowed to do under another law, something like this. these things have to be reviewed so that there is a geothermal action plan that actually makes sure that those contradictory things are removed. And this can be done also at a higher level, that, basically Europe provides a template for this, so for a harmonized European framework for this. This is one thing I think. Another thing, because I work a lot with European projects, and I have seen that geothermal research has been notoriously underfunded at both most national levels, but also at the European level. And this has been admitted also by high-ranking people from the Commission in the past when we talked about this to them. And that's one thing that has to be realized, that, if 20 proposals are needed to get one project, that's the ratio is not really working. That means if we can submit so many proposals, but there's so many project opportunities in Horizon Europe or something, then that is something that can be improved. And I think it will be. If we take mean what we say right now, then it will be improved. I'm quite optimistic there. And another thing is, if we are in this transition period, we are in a heat or energy transition period, and transition period needs a close connection with industry and science. I'm afraid to say this, but I think it's my privilege to say this, because transition means change, and change means new concepts, new ideas. And it requires the know-how from the people that are trained at universities and in high schools, etc. And so I think this is fantastic because, it provides a lot of opportunity, but it also requires systematic support for the universities and the research institutions to deliver. We need the projects, but we also need the educational programs to train the people who take over that work. What does it help if we have a wonderful program and we have lots of financial incentives if we don't have the experts to do the work? Mm-hmm. And so we need to really combine these things, and I think we can. I think that's the nice thing about Europe, because we can be complementary. We don't need to do everything individually in every country. We don't need to have the same research infrastructures that we have in the Netherlands. We don't need that also in Switzerland or that's not EU, or in the Czech Republic, or, in Greece or whatever, because we already have it. But it also means by making sure this is all European and not nationalized, we can really profit from each other. But we also have to make sure that geothermal programs are created and not shut down. We have this risk at the moment in Germany. One of the leading geothermal programs is at the university where the geoscience department is threatened to be shut down, which means that geothermal program would disappear. And that's the wrong signal. We need more of those geothermal programs and not fewer. And so that my view is that there is a European framework that is generous when it comes to research funding, that provides good templates for a regulatory conversion or adjustment, let's put it like this, and that actually fosters the training and cooperation of industry and science. And I think that will actually be the way to success, I'm pretty sure.
Thank you, David. Sanjeev, now it's your perspective on the same, but could I ask also to reflect on method? Because in recent times, European Commission came with different action plans, different structure. What, in your opinion, would be the best way to deal with the issue? I would just give an example on wind in my countries that I know quite well. So we have wind potential, but we are still discussing where to put, how to put public, and I doubt that the investment will be ever made, because government says, well, it's not tough, there is legislation, that's fine, it's commercial, but there is also this environmental performance. Would you understand? And the things are not moving in one way, neither positive, I would say neither negative. So we are still discussing for years, and perhaps we will be discussing for next 4 years. And as long as it's a small country, it doesn't matter. Actually, in Latvian case, it matters. But what should be your methods that you would suggest that could bring the most results? Because each method has some advantages and disadvantages. Because David clearly says there is potential, but then you close geothermal departments at the universities. How does it go together? It does not. It just doesn't. So yeah,
I
please.
wholeheartedly agree. And I just, before I respond to that one, I just want to say, from an industry perspective, we fully endorse everything that David has just said. I mean, we need to be going forward, not taking a step backwards, and closing down departments is just insane, if you don't mind me speaking honestly there. To your question, Andres, I think um, this is gonna sound exciting, but also a little bit boring. The boring bit is actually the Commission is already thinking about one of the things that could really fast track geothermal. And the idea came out, I think it was roughly this time, 12 months ago, when the Commission's Affordable Energy Action Plan identified this process called tripartite agreements, where you'd bring together industry, member states, and consumers, super important, together with the financial community in order to fast track investments. Now, there's excellent work that all three of these partners have just done around offshore wind. So hopefully there's a way in which we can loop in the support that Latvia needs, because every country needs support irrespective of its size. But that kind of collaborative approach is exactly what we want to have here. Now, Mariana alluded to this already in her earlier intervention when she said there'll be, a geothermal industrial alliance, something that we fully support. What we want to do now is to program this geothermal capacity target, EY target. We asked 250 gigawatts, but we're happy to negotiate with the member states and the Commission on this one. But what we need is a North Star of how much investments, the size of investments there are. Two, we need to get this kind of industrial alliance off the ground and really give that the focus. How do you go about making these implementations? And a lot of the time, what we want to do is to cross-fertilize some of the knowledge and expertise that is resting in one country and share those experiences and learnings with other countries. It's the best way to fast track regulation. So we don't, as an industry, support any watering down of environmental regulations. The thing that makes Europe different and envious to everywhere else in the world is the fact that we care about our environment, we care about our ecosystems, and we like the lifestyles that gives us. So we're not about thrashing any of the environmental regulations at all. What we want to do, however, is to make sure that every single expert in a permitting agency is fully aware of the environment, the understanding of geothermal technologies, the understanding of their specific environmental keys, but also aware what other countries have done, because a country somewhere else may have solved that person's problem. So rather than inventing the wheel for that one region, you actually can just go back and telephone somebody or have a portal where you can share all this knowledge. This is what the Industrial Alliance is all about. It's bringing the member states, the permitting agencies, the industry, the finance community, and those who are protecting our civil society and our environment together to basically drive investments. This is the best way to not just de-risk the geology, but actually just to de-risk our pathway to security. So in answer to your question, in essence, the most important data set isn't the geology. I'm sorry to say this. The most important data set isn't the money. The most important data set is the volume of geothermal capacity that we install over the next decade, because that's the difference between Europe being an independent, proud region and us being subservient to whoever's supplying us with energy. That's what we're at stake here. Much bigger than geothermal, but geothermal is part of that solution on how we solve that problem.
Drew, please come in.
Yeah, thanks, Andres, and thanks, Sanjeev and David, for their excellent comments earlier. I just want to broaden the lens a little bit here. I'm not European. I'm based in the US. My organization is global. Yes, there's all sorts of work that can be done across Europe to enhance collaboration, but I think there's a lot of global collaboration that can be undertaken as well. And there's not much that President Trump and President Biden agreed on. One of those things is geothermal. And so, I think as the Transatlantic Alliance is looking at new ways to find areas of cooperation, geothermal makes a lot of sense in that context. And Europe might be interested in it from a perspective of climate and energy security. The U.S. might be interested in it because it's oil and gas jobs and know-how that we have. It doesn't matter why a country looks at geothermal. The answer, but as long as that country is interested in it, let's try to take advantage of that cooperation and, to Sanjeev's point, get more projects in the ground and start to scale this up in a way that truly is meaningful and allows us to reach the potential that Anna Maria's data and our data shows is actually out there.
If I may, yeah, Sanjeev, if I may just to we are a bit coming to closer, Sanjeev, you could definitely have this remark, but if you also could address one issue, but I'm particularly looking for Anna Maria. We have got a question from Megan Richards that I expected. What are risks of negative public perception? She does not say, because I know Megan, risks of geothermal as such, but public perception negative is very widespread phenomena, and that's we need all the understand where the risks could come, because if you fail in public perception, then whatever your plans are, they will be in the best case slowed down, in the worst case they will be abandoned, because politically it would be easy to say, look, it's disaster. So I know that somebody doesn't like windmills in sea, for example. Yeah. So and it stops, and there is enough tractation or enough public support to sustain it. So it's not just one person's will. So I think that's for geothermal is quite important. So Sanjeev, the floor is yours, and Anna Maria. Then I would need to conclude. If somebody has a short remark, just raise your hand before I conclude after that.
I'm going to be super brief to allow Anna Maria to come in as well. Look, public perception is an interesting thing. I mean, we have part of or half of the geothermal industry is invisible. So the public perception is in fact, such an opposite problem that we have to go and remind people that you're actually in a building that's heated and cooled by a geothermal heat pump, for example. So, there are millions of examples where you've applied geothermal to very sensitive public locations. The Palais de l'Élysée, for example, President Macron and every single French president from now until the end of history is going to be in a palace that's heated and cooled by geothermal. Absolutely nobody can see where that geothermal system is. That's its beauty. The same as NATO's headquarters. You have no idea where the geothermal heating and cooling system is, but it's providing secure and stable issues. We take public acceptance very, very seriously, and there are loads of examples where people who are brand new to geothermal instantly, intuitively understand its values and the benefits that it brings. And actually, the best example is not to look at what the geothermal industry has done, but I think it was 2019 or 2020, the gas industry, Eurogas, they did a big survey on, what's the public perception of the most cheapest and efficient heating systems in households. So, of course, number one was gas boilers. Number two was bioenergy. And out of nowhere, number three was geothermal. And there was absolutely no understanding. So there's a broad understanding that geothermal is a good thing. Where there have been one or two issues, and there's only one or two issues you can really look at across Europe, they have been addressed by the industry. We have responded to them very, very clearly. There was an example where a geothermal heat pump was installed and the permitting agency actually rejected the permit. What we have then said as an industry is that to everybody who's drilling a geothermal system, one, you have to be trained to do to install your heat pump, but two, if the permitting agency says no, you must respect the permitting agency's authority. We want stronger permitting rules being applied because that's the best thing for our industry. But yes, public acceptance is an issue. But the biggest issue from the public perspective is they just don't know geothermal exists. And this is what we need to do to address that.
Thank you. Anna Maria, please.
Yes, just a very, very quick example. This is the main problem, that geothermal is invisible. So we cannot demonstrate like a solar panel or a windmill that look how useful it is. And just a very little nice example from Hungary. We have a huge district heating system in Szeged, which is a big town in the southern part of Hungary, where in the past couple of years they transformed the largest part of that fossil gas-based district heating system to geothermal. And what they did is that they had these huge, ugly heat centers, which are not really very attractive industrial buildings, but they transformed the side of these big heat plants to open-air movies, where they were in the summertime. They were showing very nice little animations, films about the geothermal development, the benefits of geothermal, how it is cleaner, how the gas bills will lower, and so on and so on. So I think we need a lot of local campaigns like this to really educate people and to show people what are the benefits for geothermal. And I can say in a country like Hungary, where I am from, where we really have long-lasting traditions of using geothermal, people love geothermal. So people do not really have issues with geothermal. And I think with these local training campaigns, and I think we should start at schools at early age education. This should be part of teaching the young generation all these benefits of geothermal. And I think there is, going back to one of the previous issues, that there is little funding for geothermal. Funding should not go only for the research, for the innovation, but I think much more resources should be allocated to this raising awareness campaigns in general. Thank you.
Thank you. I saw, Drew, you raised your hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight, we've talked about it, but I just want to be explicit about it. Geothermal has one of the smallest surface footprints of any energy source, but particularly for a renewable energy source. In a world where there is a lot of public opposition to energy infrastructure, that is a huge benefit that geothermal has, as Sanjeev pointed out recently. But there's all sorts of examples. Like, the train station in Lausanne, Switzerland, is being retrofitted through a big drilling campaign to be heated by geothermal in the center of Lausanne, Switzerland, right? But you don't see that except for the construction site. And that's a good thing. And there's plenty of examples like that can be pointed to across the continent that can be expanded and shown the benefit.
Yeah. So for concluding, first of all, thank you all of you. It was really great. Thank you, Drew, for joining so early. And the first lesson I get is definitely you need to be, attractive presentation tools about the potential. And I think GeoMap Europe gives us the perception of colorful perception, what could be achieved, where there are potential, even if it's still not got to precise data, but it gives this visualization of opportunity. And as it is global, so it is not only Europe, so we can see more broader. So what I would be encouraging everybody definitely to promote discussion on geothermal. GeoMap Europe is a very nice tool, and I understand Drew would be very happy to come and present just really to get this visualization understanding, because we need to cover the gaps that we have on this. The second, what David said and Sanjeev, I think what for planned with the commission, definitely there are a lot of areas, but perhaps to thinking a bit out of the box also would be helpful. Just to give an example, I know that it is controversial. In grid package, they came these 8 highways. Fine. Well, that a lot of people would say they are not the right highways. Yeah. So that's something different. But I like that you became very concrete in some projects, perhaps, where we have already could come in such action plan, because at the end of the day, you need to have this tripartite agreement, and you need to drill and need to start, because even if you have the most perfect legal requirement, then there will be no development. And last but not least, it's definitely research. Anna Maria and her colleagues do a fantastic job. But what David said definitely deeply upsets us, because it's not developments. I know that Anna Sobchak demonstrated from the set plan what we have doing in this area. So there are a lot of, I would say, potential to collaborate closer and really to deal with the issues that geothermal are facing. Because for me, as being in politics, I would say, before you dream of some technologies that are not there, look what you have. And that, I think, is the most important. None will fill all the void, but it would be very wrong not to understand the potential and use as far you can. because it's far more difficult than sometimes it is. And in Europe, we are rather organized and we start moving. We usually move okay. The difficulty in Europe is to get this drive. So perhaps on geothermal now we would have this chance. So thank you very much, all of you. And it was really great. And thank you for keeping your interventions very short. We ended on time. And